"What the hell are you doing to my son?" The voice exploded through the nursery like a gunshot, ricocheting off the pastel walls and soft lullaby playing from the baby monitor. Naomi Reed froze. In her arms, Caleb Whitmore suckled quietly, his tiny hands fisting gently into the cotton of her blouse. Her left hand supported the back of his head. Her right cradled his legs. She had unbuttoned just enough of her uniform to allow him to latch, and now, the billionaire she worked for stood in the doorway, his face contorted with disbelief and fury. Julian Whitmore. Widower. A man known for controlling every variable in his orbit. And right now, the one thing he couldn't control, his infant son, was nursing in the arms of a black maid he barely spoke to. "You get your hands off my child," he growled, storming across the room. Naomi's breath caught, but her grip on Caleb didn't falter. She gently began to unlatch him, shielding his head with her body as he whimpered in protest. "Mr. Whitmore," she said carefully, "please, let me explain." "Explain?" His voice cracked with rage. "You think you can just put yourself, your body, on my son? Feed him like some damn wet nurse? This is my son, Ms. Reed. Who the hell gave you the right?" Naomi stood slowly, still holding Caleb protectively against her chest. Her blouse remained partially undone, but modesty was the last thing she cared about now. "I didn't plan this," she said, her voice trembling. "He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. The formula, he kept rejecting it. He was growing weaker. I used to be a neonatal nurse. And I still produce milk." He latched. "He needed it." "Shut up," Julian snapped, stepping closer. "You don't get to make decisions like that in this house." "I only did what I thought was right," Naomi said, a little firmer now. "He was starving, Mr. Whitmore. He stopped crying. He stopped moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch him fade." Julian stood just inches away now, towering over her. His hands were clenched, his jaw set tight. And then, without warning, he slapped her. A sharp, open-handed blow across the cheek. Naomi stumbled sideways, her breath knocked out of her. Caleb cried out in her arms, startled by the impact. Naomi gasped, pressing her palm to the stinging heat of her face, but she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just turned her body instinctively, placing herself between the child and the man who'd struck her. The nursery fell into dead silence. Julian stood there, chest heaving. His hands still half-raised, as if even he couldn't believe what he'd done. Naomi met his eyes. Her cheek burned. Her vision swam. But her voice, when it came, was steady. "How dare you?" she whispered. "I saved your son." He flinched. Just barely. But it was there. "I don't need saving," he muttered. "Not from someone like you." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Someone like me?" She echoed, the words like knives. "You mean black? Poor? A woman?" Julian looked away, but didn't deny it. Naomi took a shaky breath. "I lost a baby 3 months ago, Mr. Whitmore. I held him in my arms as he died. I know what it feels like to watch something so small slip away while you stand there helpless. I saw that same look in Caleb's eyes yesterday. So I acted. Like a mother would." Julian said nothing. Naomi stepped past him, walking to the crib. She laid Caleb down gently. The baby squirmed once, then stilled, his stomach finally full. His cheeks pink. His body at peace. She turned toward the door. "I'll get my things." She walked out without another word. Julian didn't stop her. But his hand trembled at his side. The corridor stretched before Naomi like a tunnel of shame. Every step echoed in her ears. Her cheek pulsed with every heartbeat, the sting of Julian's palm still burning through her skin. But worse than the pain was the look in his eyes. The disgust. The disbelief. As if, in that moment, her humanity had evaporated. She wasn't sure what hurt more, being hit, or being treated like she didn't belong at all. Down the hall, Monica Hale, one of the older maids, glanced up from the linen cart. Her lips parted as if to speak, but Naomi didn't slow. She passed her in silence and kept walking, straight to the cramped servant quarters in the rear wing of the estate. Inside, she collapsed onto the edge of her narrow bed and let out the breath she'd been holding. Her bag sat in the corner, half-packed since the day she took the job. She stared at it. Maybe she should have left a long time ago. But even now, her arms still remembered Caleb's weight. Her chest still remembered his desperate, instinctive latch. And beneath all the anger and humiliation, she felt no regret. Not for what she did, only for where she did it. Upstairs, Julian stood over Caleb's crib. The boy slept soundly. There was no tightness in his brow, no cries, no tiny fists clenched in pain. Just rest. Come. Julian sank into the nearby rocking chair, his face pale. His hands were still shaking. Those same hands had once held Rachel, his late wife, through long nights of postpartum terror. Those hands had signed contracts worth billions. Those hands had fired hundreds. And today, those hands had struck the only person who had made his son stop crying. Suddenly, Julian Whitmore, tall widower, titan of industry, felt very, very small. Caleb stirred in his sleep and let out a soft sigh. Julian looked toward the door where Naomi had disappeared and whispered to no one, "What have I done?" Naomi Reed stood in front of the small mirror in her room, staring at the crimson blooming across her cheek. It stung. Not just the skin, but something deeper. Something no ice pack could numb. She had been slapped before. In hospitals, on subways, once by a grieving mother in the ER who couldn't accept the loss of her baby. But this was different. This was humiliation wrapped in silence. She gently traced the swelling with 2 fingers. Caleb's scent still lingered on her uniform, milk and powder and something impossibly fragile. The boy had calmed in her arms like he belonged there, like he had chosen her. And then Julian Whitmore had destroyed it all in one violent moment. She blinked hard. No tears. Not for him. A soft knock tapped against her door. 3 polite raps. She hesitated. Yes. The door opened, and in stepped Vivien Whitmore, dignified in a wine-colored housecoat, silver hair pulled into a loose twist. She carried a small china cup, steam curling above it like smoke from something ancient. Naomi stood. "Mrs. Whitmore." "Sit, child," Vivien said softly. "This isn't that kind of visit." Naomi obeyed. Vivien placed the cup on the side table and sat across from her, knees creaking faintly as she settled in. Her eyes, sharp, thoughtful, studied Naomi in the low lamplight. "I heard the yelling," she said. Naomi said nothing. "I didn't hear your voice, though." Naomi glanced down at the floor. There wasn't room for it. Vivien let out a quiet breath. "He shouldn't have hit you." "No," Naomi whispered. "He crossed a line. And he knows it." Naomi looked up. "Then why didn't he stop himself?" Vivien's fingers tapped lightly on the teacup. "Because pain is loud when it has nowhere to go. And my son has been carrying Rachel's ghost in his chest for over a year now. That ghost doesn't comfort him. It burns him. Every day." "I didn't mean to overstep." Vivien's eyes softened. "You didn't. You filled a space none of us could." Naomi's voice broke. "He was starving. I couldn't just watch." "You did what was right," Vivien said, "even when it wasn't safe. That takes more courage than most people ever realize." Naomi blinked quickly. "I wasn't trying to be brave. I was just remembering." "Your child?" Vivien asked. Naomi nodded. "Elijah. He was 6 weeks early. I was working 2 jobs. He caught an infection, and by the time I got him to the..." She didn't finish. Vivien reached out and placed her hand gently over Naomi's. "I'm sorry. I keep thinking," Naomi said, barely above a whisper, "if someone, anyone, had stepped in when I couldn't, maybe he'd still be here." Vivien squeezed her hand. "Maybe that's why you stepped in today." They sat in silence for a long moment, the teacups steaming between them, a fragile peace forming over shared loss. "I don't know if I should stay," Naomi said finally. Vivien's voice was quiet but firm. "If you leave, it should be your choice. Not because a man lashed out in grief and shame." Naomi swallowed hard. "He looked at me like I wasn't real, like I was just a body in the wrong room." Vivien rose slowly. "My son has always trusted walls more than people. But today, you did something none of us could. You reached a child no one else could soothe. That matters. Naomi didn't respond. Before leaving, Vivien paused at the door. Thank you for saving my grandson. Then she was gone. Down the hall, Julian sat alone in the study, the room thick with shadows and silence. The fireplace remained unlit. His phone sat face down on the desk. His laptop untouched. His hands, still trembling, rested on his knees. He couldn't stop replaying it. The slap. The look in her eyes. The sheer, stunned stillness of the room afterward. He had never raised his hand to anyone before, not Rachel, not employees, not even himself in anger. But something about that moment, walking in and seeing Naomi there, feeding Caleb so naturally, had broken something in him. Or maybe exposed it. He remembered Rachel in this room, rocking Caleb in the same chair where he now sat. Sweating. Exhausted. She'd whispered to him, "If I don't make it, find someone who sees him. Really sees him." And Naomi had. When no one else could. And he'd struck her for it. He lowered his face into his hands and stayed there, until the clock chimed once. Then again. And again. The next morning, the estate moved with uneasy quiet. Caleb awoke calm. He didn't cry. Didn't thrash. He fed from the bottle with little resistance, still drowsy from the full belly of the night before. Julian dressed in silence. His tie knotted too tightly. His shoes louder than usual on the marble floor. He didn't speak to the staff. Didn't eat. Didn't even look anyone in the eye. At noon he passed Naomi in the hallway. She was coming from the laundry room, her uniform folded over her arm. A small duffel bag hung from her shoulder. Their eyes met for a split second. He stopped walking. "So you're leaving," he said, voice dry. Naomi didn't answer at first. Then, "You made that choice for me." His jaw flexed. "Please," he said. "Wait." She hesitated. Julian glanced down the hallway, then stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I'm sorry." Naomi stared at him. The swelling on her cheek had faded, but not the damage. "Sorry," she repeated. "I was wrong. I reacted like a man who didn't understand what was right in front of him. You saw me saving your son, and you hit me for it." "I saw something I couldn't explain," he said. "Something I wasn't allowed to need." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "And now?" Julian looked away. "Now I know I was watching someone do what love looks like." Silence stretched between them. "I want you to stay," he said. "As Caleb's caregiver. Not a maid. Not help. Family." Naomi took a long breath. "I'll stay," she said, her voice calm. "For him. For Caleb." Julian nodded. "But hear me now," she continued. "If you ever raise your hand again, I won't protect you from what follows." "You shouldn't have to protect anyone," he said quietly. "Least of all from me." They stood there, two people carrying too much grief in too tight a space, separated by power, by history, by pain, but somehow, in that hallway, beginning something else. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a beginning. The house was quiet, unnaturally so. Julian Whitmore sat in the nursery, the one place he had avoided since Rachel's death. The rocking chair creaked beneath him as he swayed gently, though Caleb wasn't in his arms. His son lay sleeping in the crib, his chest rising in calm, even rhythm. No cries. No flailing. No endless hours of restlessness. Naomi had done what no doctor, no nurse, no nanny could manage. And he had struck her for it. Julian leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands covering his face. Shame curled in his gut like acid. The memory of Rachel haunted this room. Her voice still lived in the corners. That gentle hum she used to sing. The sound of her slippers on the hardwood. Her whispers when Caleb couldn't sleep. "If I don't make it," she had said one night, when her fever was raging and the sheets were soaked through with sweat, "promise me you'll find someone who can hold him like I do." At the time, he had brushed it off. Told her she would recover. Told her she was scaring him. But she hadn't recovered. And when Naomi held Caleb with that same natural ease, when Julian saw the peace on his son's face, it was like Rachel had returned. And instead of embracing it, he had destroyed it. He stood and walked to the crib. Caleb stirred slightly, then settled. Julian brushed a hand gently over his son's soft hair. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I keep saying that lately, don't I?" The baby didn't stir. Later that night, Julian wandered down the hall and stopped in front of the door Rachel used to keep locked, the personal study she never let anyone into. It had remained untouched since her passing. Until now. Julian inserted the key, turned it. The door creaked open. Dust floated through the slant of light as he stepped inside. The room smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Rachel's scent. Her presence. Her secrets. Shelves lined the walls, journals, binders, photo albums. A half-finished scrapbook sat on the desk, a pressed flower marking the last page. Julian moved toward the corner where a tall oak cabinet stood. Inside it were dozens of folders, neatly labeled in Rachel's elegant handwriting. His eyes paused on one. "Read, Naomi, observation notes." His stomach tightened. He pulled the file out, hands shaking slightly. Inside were several pages, notes, timelines, even a printed photo of Naomi at a free clinic, holding a crying child in her lap. Julian sat slowly. Naomi Reed, works part-time as a nurse tech. Lost son due to hospital mismanagement. Still volunteers at Elmwood Clinic on Thursdays. Compassionate. Steady. Does not raise her voice. Presence calms infants. Holds grief like a quiet room holds breath. Rachel had been watching her. Searching for her. Another note in the margin. "If anything happens to me, this woman should raise our son." Julian's eyes filled with tears. He hadn't just struck a woman trying to help his child. He had struck the very person Rachel had chosen. Naomi stood alone outside, in the garden near the east wing. The night air was cool, the grass damp beneath her shoes. Stars blinked overhead, indifferent to the lives unraveling below. She had stayed. Not because she forgave Julian. Not yet. But because Caleb needed her. Still, a question tugged at her constantly. Why had Rachel chosen her? They had met only once, months ago, at the Elmwood Clinic. Rachel had brought Caleb in for a minor rash. Naomi had recognized the exhaustion behind the makeup, the tremor in her hands. She had offered to hold the baby while Rachel filled out forms. They didn't exchange more than a few words. And yet, Naomi heard the crunch of footsteps behind her. "Julian, I didn't mean to disturb you," he said quietly. "You didn't," she replied, still facing the garden. He paused. "I went into Rachel's study." Naomi turned, surprised. "She kept records," he continued, "of people, of possibilities. She chose you, Naomi, long before this week." Naomi's breath caught. "Why?" "I think," Julian said, voice rough, "because she saw something in you that reminded her of what she wished she could still be." "Steady." Naomi lowered her gaze. "I didn't feel any of those things yesterday." "You were," he said, "and I was the opposite of all of them." They stood in silence for a long moment. "She didn't trust many people," Julian said. "But she trusted you." Naomi looked at him. "And do you?" He didn't answer right away. Then, "I want to learn how." That wasn't an apology. But it was something. Back inside, in the dim hallway near the servants' stairwell, Mr. Langston, the butler, stood watching the camera feed from the garden. His lips were pressed into a thin line. Behind him, Monica Hale appeared silently, arms crossed. "So," she said, "he's crawling now, is he?" Mr. Langston didn't respond. Monica sneered. "Let's see how long that lasts." And then she turned, walking back into the shadows of the estate. The next morning, Naomi entered the dining room expecting to find her usual duties waiting. Breakfast trays to clear, linens to fold, another day of quiet invisibility. Instead, Julian Whitmore was already seated at the end of the long mahogany table, suit jacket off, sleeves rolled, hands clasped as if he'd been rehearsing a speech all night. "Naomi," he said, standing when she stepped in. She stopped mid-stride. "Sir, I'd like you to sit." She hesitated, eyeing the chair across from him. "Is this professional or personal?" "Both," he said. "But mostly it's for Caleb." Naomi slowly lowered herself into the chair. The air between them was tight with something unsaid. She folded her hands in her lap, back straight, bracing herself. Julian didn't look like a billionaire today. Not like the cold titan who'd once barked orders from marble staircases. He looked like a man with too many regrets and not enough words. "I read every note Rachel left," he began. "She wrote about you. More than once." Naomi said nothing. She didn't want a stranger raising Caleb. She wanted someone who knew loss. Someone who would choose love, not duty. "I'm just a maid," Naomi said quietly. Julian leaned forward. "You're the only person he's ever slept through the night with." Naomi blinked. Julian continued, "I don't want you cleaning sheets. Or folding towels. Or taking lunch orders from staff who still think you're temporary." He took a breath. "I want you to stay in this house as Caleb's official caregiver. Full salary. Medical benefits. A room upstairs. You'll make the schedule. You'll make decisions when I can't." Naomi's eyes flickered. "You want me to raise your son?" "I want you to help me raise him," Julian said. "Because I don't know how. And I'm not too proud to admit that anymore." She stared at him, heart pounding. "I can't promise perfection," he added. "I still lose my temper. I still don't know how to grieve without breaking something." "I'm not looking for perfect," Naomi said. "I'm looking for safe. For him." Julian nodded. "Then say yes." Naomi looked down at her hands, the same hands that had rocked Caleb when he wouldn't stop screaming, the hands that had once buried a child of her own. "I'll stay," she said softly, "under one condition." "Name it." "I'm not your employee when it comes to Caleb. I'm not a hireling. If I see something wrong, I'll speak. If I think he needs something, I'll act." "Agreed. And if you ever raise your hand again, to me or anyone else, I walk." Julian's throat tightened. "You won't have to." She stood slowly. "Then I'll go unpack." Upstairs, Monica Hale stood outside the linen closet, arms crossed as she watched Naomi pass with her suitcase. "Moving up in the world, are we?" she muttered. Naomi paused but didn't respond. "Funny how some people know exactly which buttons to push," Monica continued, voice low, sharp. "Milk a baby once and suddenly you're the queen of the estate." Naomi turned. "I'm here for Caleb. Not for power." Monica smiled sweetly. "Oh honey, you've already taken it. You just don't know it yet." Naomi stepped closer. "What is it you actually want, Monica?" Monica's smile faded. "A clean house. No drama. No bleeding hearts who think their pain makes them special." Naomi held her gaze. "Pain doesn't make anyone special. It just reminds us who's still human." She walked away. Monica's eyes narrowed. That evening, Julian entered the nursery just as Naomi was humming softly to Caleb, cradling him in her arms. The boy had grown calmer over the last 2 days. His colic had lessened. His eyes tracked Naomi when she moved. He smiled now. It terrified Julian how much better his son was under her care. And yet, it gave him hope. "You're good with him," Julian said quietly. Naomi didn't turn. "I just listen to what he needs. I don't always know how to do that." She finally looked over. "You don't need to know everything. You just need to show up. Consistently." Julian nodded. "Then I'll start now." He stepped closer. Caleb saw him and stretched his arms toward his father. It was the first time he'd done that since Rachel died. Julian's breath caught as he lifted his son gently. Caleb nestled into his shoulder without fuss. No tears. No squirming. Julian looked at Naomi, something raw in his eyes. "Thank you," he said. Naomi nodded but didn't speak. Later that night, in the kitchen, Mr. Langston approached Naomi as she poured a glass of water. "You've changed this house," he said. Naomi turned. "For better or worse?" The old butler gave a tired smile. "We've all been waiting for something to fill the silence since Mrs. Vaughn passed. You didn't fill it. You taught us how to sit with it." Naomi softened. "You okay with me staying?" "I was okay the moment Caleb smiled again." He patted her shoulder and walked away. Naomi stood there a moment longer. Then she exhaled slowly for the first time in weeks and smiled. The Whitmore estate had always been a quiet place. grand, regal, and distant, like a cathedral of wealth where emotions echoed too loudly to be welcome. But lately, the silence had changed. It wasn't absence anymore. It was watching. And no one watched more than Monica Hale. From her post in the upstairs linen corridor, she noted the patterns. Naomi leaving Caleb's room at precisely 8:05 p.m., Mr. Whitmore lingering at the nursery door longer than necessary, Mr. Langston speaking softly to Naomi in the pantry, and the sound, soft and unmistakable, of laughter at the breakfast table. It irked her. She had been with the Whitmore family for nearly a decade. She knew how to polish crystal, fold linen with precision, and clean a nursery so spotless it could pass a surgeon's test. She had earned her place. And then this woman, this stranger, walked in and dared to feed the child from her own body? Now she had the master's trust, the baby's love, the butler's respect. It was intolerable. Downstairs, in the study, Julian sat at his desk, staring at a surveillance feed on his laptop. The estate's security system had been recently upgraded. He'd insisted on it after Rachel's death. Too much paranoia. Too many unanswered questions. But tonight, he wasn't looking at outside threats. He was watching a paused frame of Naomi, seated beside Caleb's crib, reading from a worn children's book. He didn't know why he'd pulled it up. Maybe curiosity. Maybe guilt. Maybe envy. There was something in the way she touched his son's hair. The way her voice lowered when she read the sad parts. The way Caleb responded, eyes alert, hands relaxed. Julian reached for the mouse. He clicked play. She turned a page, and even though there was no audio, Julian imagined her voice filling the room with warmth. With something Rachel used to bring. Something gone. Until now. He closed the laptop, shame crawling up his throat. He wasn't just watching her. He was depending on her. The next day, Naomi moved through the house with practiced calm. Caleb had begun to nap without fuss, his digestion improving. She'd introduced a warm towel routine after baths and whispered lullabies in a rhythm he now recognized. It was becoming peaceful. Until Mr. Langston approached her near the greenhouse. "Someone's been going through your room," he said. Naomi froze. "What?" "I check the staff wings every morning. Your door was unlocked yesterday afternoon. You don't leave it that way." "No," Naomi said, eyes narrowing. "I don't." He leaned in. "Don't panic. But be aware." Naomi nodded slowly. "Do you think it's Monica?" "I think Monica sees this house as hers. And you're a threat she doesn't understand." Naomi folded her arms. "Let her watch. I've got nothing to hide." That evening, Naomi tucked Caleb into his crib, placed a hand gently on his chest, and whispered a prayer under her breath. She hadn't prayed in years. Not since Elijah. But somehow, this boy, this pale, cooing soul with Rachel's eyes, was teaching her to believe again. Not in God, maybe, but in new beginnings. She turned off the lamp and slipped out quietly. In the hallway, Monica stood at the far end watching. Naomi met her gaze and didn't blink. Monica smiled, saccharine and sharp. "You sure know how to play the role." Naomi walked right past her. "You sure know how to play the fool." Elsewhere on the estate, in a rarely used guest suite, Malcolm Price, a private investigator hired weeks ago by Julian, reviewed his findings. He hadn't been summoned lately, but he knew how to stay busy. Naomi Reed had no criminal record. No priors. No lawsuits. No strange associations. Her nursing license had lapsed only because she couldn't afford the renewal fee after her son's death. That fact had lingered with him. A child buried before his mother. A woman grieving while folding towels in another woman's home. But tonight he found something new. A page from Rachel Vaughn's old will, previously unknown to Julian. Malcolm stared at it. It named Naomi. Not as guardian. As co-parent. His phone buzzed. A message from Julian. "Need to speak. Tomorrow morning. Alone." Malcolm leaned back in the chair, the soft click of the desk lamp echoing in the still room. Things were shifting. Meanwhile, in a shadowed corner of the estate cellar, Monica stood before a box of old house files. Most were mundane. Pest control contracts, window repair records, expired staff IDs. But then she found it. A sealed envelope with the initials RV. She opened it with care. Inside, a single-page letter in Rachel Vaughn's handwriting. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Caleb will need someone who doesn't flinch, who doesn't fold. That woman Naomi Reed held him once and I knew she was the one. If Julian resists, remind him. He loved me because I saw the storm in him and stayed anyway. Naomi will too if he doesn't break her first. Monica read it twice. Then she smiled and slid the letter into her apron pocket. The next morning, the mansion seemed quieter than usual, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Naomi stepped out of Caleb's room just after sunrise. He'd slept through the night again. A full 8 hours. No crying. No gasping. Just the soft rhythm of a content baby. She gently closed the nursery door and headed toward the East Wing kitchen, hoping to steal a moment alone before breakfast prep began. She didn't expect to find Mr. Langston already there, pouring tea like he'd been waiting. "I didn't sleep," he said without looking up. Naomi tilted her head. "Bad night. Bad feeling." He handed her a mug and lowered his voice. "You're being watched." Naomi didn't flinch. "I know. Monica's not just angry. She's digging. Let her." Mr. Langston shook his head. "She's not digging for the truth. She's digging for a weapon." Naomi's grip tightened around the mug. "She went down into the cellar last night," he added. "Unusual time. Unusual purpose." Naomi nodded slowly. "She's not going to stop until she makes me the villain." Mr. Langston looked at her carefully. "Then it's time you found the rest of the story before she does." Later that afternoon, while Caleb napped and the household buzzed with weekend preparations, Naomi slipped down the narrow stairwell near the west pantry. It led to the cellar, dusty, cavernous, and mostly forgotten. The smell hit her first, old cedar, mildew, and faint traces of lavender sachets long dried out. She moved carefully, using the flashlight from her phone, passing shelves stacked with preserved fruit, antique dishware, and boxes marked with fading labels. Then she found it. A battered filing cabinet against the back wall. Inside, hundreds of documents, old staff records, insurance files, handwritten memos. But one folder stood out. Rachel Vaughn's personal effects. Naomi opened it slowly. Inside were photographs. Rachel as a child, Rachel pregnant, Rachel in the hospital holding Caleb with a forced smile. Tucked in the back was a small voice recorder labeled simply, "Naomi." She clicked it on. A burst of static. Then Rachel's voice, tired but clear. "If Julian won't listen, if I'm gone, tell her I chose her. Naomi, if you're hearing this, it's because I saw you. Not just as help. Not just as kind. But as family. You gave Elijah peace at the clinic. I saw it. I saw how you looked at him like he wasn't broken. Like he wasn't dying. That's what I need for Caleb. He won't survive without that kind of love." The recording clicked off. Naomi stood frozen. Tears blurred her vision. Not because of the words, but because someone had finally said them out loud. Seen her. Affirmed her worth without question or condition. She pressed the recorder to her chest. Behind her, a faint creak echoed across the floorboards. Naomi turned. Monica Hale stood at the foot of the stairs, arms crossed, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Well, Monica said. "Looks like you found your little shrine." Naomi slipped the recorder into her pocket. "Looking for something, Monica?" "I've already found it," Monica said. "You've been lying this whole time. Manipulating your way into this house, into that child's life." "I was chosen," Naomi said firmly. "Long before you ever noticed." "Chosen?" Monica sneered. Rachel was grieving. Delirious. She'd have latched onto anyone with a warm smile. "Or maybe," Naomi said, stepping forward, "she saw what you never could." Monica's eyes darkened. "You think Julian will believe you? You're just a replacement. A placeholder." Naomi didn't flinch. "Then let's find out." Upstairs, Julian was pacing the study when Malcolm Price, his private investigator, entered with a sealed folder in hand. "I found something," Malcolm said. Julian took the folder and flipped through its contents. His eyes froze on the page Rachel had written, a revised, unsigned clause in her will. It named Naomi Reed as a co-guardian. Not backup. Not temporary. Equal. She never filed this, Julian said, voice tight. No, Malcolm replied. But she wrote it. And she kept it. That matters. Before Julian could respond, the intercom buzzed. Sir, Mr. Langston's voice came through. There's something you should see. In the drawing room. 10 minutes later, Julian entered the room to find Naomi standing at one end, Monica at the other. Mr. Langston stood quietly near the door, arms folded, watching like a referee at a prize fight. Naomi held the recorder in her hand. Play it, she said. Julian looked at her, then took the device and pressed play. Rachel's voice filled the room. Every word a hammer to the silence. When it ended, Julian didn't speak right away. He looked at Monica. Did you know about this? I found the letter last night, she admitted, unbothered. I was going to bring it to you. No, Naomi said. You were going to use it against me. Monica's smile vanished. Julian's voice was cold. You searched her room. You went through my wife's personal effects. You tried to undermine someone my wife trusted. I was protecting this house, Monica said. No, he replied. You were protecting your pride. He turned to Mr. Langston. She's done. Get her out. Tonight. Monica's face twisted. You'll regret this. No, Julian said. I regret not doing it sooner. Monica stormed out, heels clicking like gunfire. Julian turned to Naomi. I didn't know, he said. But now I do. Naomi nodded. What you do with it, that's up to you. Julian looked down at the recorder still warm in his hand. And for the first time since Rachel died, he didn't feel haunted. He felt led. The next morning, the air in the Whitmore estate felt different. Lighter. For the first time in a long while, the walls weren't whispering old grief. They were breathing in something new. Naomi stood by the nursery window, sunlight pooling at her feet, as Caleb babbled softly in his crib. He kicked his legs with delight, arms reaching toward her. Good morning, little man, she said, scooping him up with practiced ease. Looks like you slept better than all of us. He gurgled in reply, drooling onto her shoulder as he nuzzled into her neck. Downstairs, Monica Hale's absence was already noticeable. The kitchen staff seemed less tense. The maids, less guarded. Even the air smelled fresher, free of her thick perfume and cold silence. Julian watched it all unfold from his office window, coffee untouched on his desk. He hadn't slept much. Not because of fear or stress, he had finally let go of that, but because something had shifted deep within him. He'd listened to the voice recording 3 more times after Naomi went to bed. Each time, Rachel's words carved deeper into his heart. She saw you. She trusted you. And now he needed to do the same. Naomi came down mid-morning with Caleb in her arms, expecting only to grab a bottle and return upstairs. Instead, she found Julian waiting in the sunroom, dressed in a soft navy sweater and slacks, sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly out of place. He stood when he saw them. Morning, he said. Naomi paused. Good morning. He stepped closer, hesitated, then reached out. May I? She handed Caleb to him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. Julian took the baby carefully, like a man finally aware of the miracle he held. Caleb stared at him for a moment, then gave a sleepy grin. Julian smiled back. He's not afraid of me anymore. He never was, Naomi said. He just needed to feel safe. Julian looked at her. And you made that possible. She nodded once, quietly. I want to do more, he said. Be more. For him. But also, for the kind of home Rachel envisioned. Naomi waited. I'd like to make your position official, Julian continued. Not just on paper. I want to change the estate's trust to include you in decisions regarding Caleb. Legal, medical, educational. Everything. Naomi's eyes widened slightly. That's a lot. I know, he said. But it's the right thing. She chose you. I almost ruined that. I won't make that mistake again. Naomi looked at Caleb, who had begun to gnaw lazily on Julian's collar. "I don't want power," she said softly. "I just want peace for him. And honesty from you." Julian nodded. "Then let's build that together." That afternoon, a notary arrived. Papers were signed, witnessed, filed. Naomi became more than staff, more than nanny. She became part of the structure. That evening, as the sun set in golden sheets across the west lawn, Naomi stepped outside with Caleb on her hip. The grass was soft beneath her shoes. The sky, open and forgiving. Julian joined her after a moment, sleeves still rolled, hands in his pockets. "Do you ever miss nursing?" he asked gently. Naomi rocked the baby. "I miss what it meant. The stillness. The ability to help without needing to speak." Julian nodded slowly. "You helped me too." She looked at him. "I didn't do it for you." "I know. That's what makes it matter more." He paused. "Would you ever go back to it?" Naomi smiled faintly. "One day. Maybe. But for now this," she looked at Caleb, who had dozed off mid-sunset, "this is the work that matters." Julian followed her gaze. "He's lucky to have you." Naomi looked back at him. "He needs both of us." Julian held her eyes for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Then that's what he'll have." Inside, Mr. Langston stood at the far end of the hall, listening from just beyond view. He exhaled quietly and smiled to himself. The house wasn't haunted anymore. It was healing. The storm came in quiet. Gray clouds rolled across the San Marino sky, painting the estate in shadows. Naomi stood by the window in Caleb's room, gently patting his back as thunder murmured in the distance. She'd always found storms calming. Elijah used to fall asleep during rain. Caleb was no different. But outside the glass, a black sedan rolled up the curved driveway, a car she didn't recognize. By the time she laid Caleb down and made it to the foyer, the butler was already speaking with the guest. "Sir," Mr. Langston said, voice uncertain, "this gentleman insists on seeing Mr. Whitmore. He says he's family." Julian emerged from the study, clearly surprised to see a man in his late 40s standing at the door. His salt-and-pepper beard was trimmed, his coat expensive but wrinkled, as if he'd been traveling for a long time without pause. "Isaiah Vaughn," the man said, offering a tight smile. "Rachel's brother." Julian stiffened. "That's not possible. Isaiah disappeared 20 years ago." "Not disappeared," Isaiah corrected. "Estranged." Naomi stood silently at the edge of the room, instinctively shifting her body slightly in front of the staircase, as if shielding Caleb upstairs. Isaiah noticed her but said nothing. Julian stepped forward. "Why now?" Isaiah looked around. "Can we sit?" Julian led him into the drawing room. Naomi started to turn away, but Julian stopped her with a glance. "Stay." She nodded once and followed. Isaiah sat heavily into the chair, rubbing his hands together. "I didn't come for money," he began, "or to contest anything. I came because I heard my sister died and left behind a child. A child I didn't know existed. That's on me." Julian crossed his arms. "You abandoned her." "I was 17, Isaiah said. "Our parents died in a car accident. She was 14. I wasn't ready. I ran. I was a coward." Julian didn't speak. Isaiah looked at Naomi now. "And you're?" "I care for Caleb," she said. Isaiah studied her with a slow nod. Rachel always had a soft spot for people others ignored. Naomi bristled but held her ground. Julian's voice cut in. "What do you want, Isaiah?" "To see him," Isaiah said. "To meet the boy. I know I've forfeited every right. But he's my blood. And Rachel would have wanted me to try." Julian remained silent, jaw tight. Naomi spoke first. "He's asleep now." "I understand." Julian finally spoke. "You can stay. One day. No overnights. No claims. And only if Naomi agrees." Isaiah turned to her. "May I?" Naomi hesitated. Her instincts screamed caution, but Caleb deserved to know his roots. "You can meet him tomorrow," she said. "Under supervision." Isaiah smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Later that night, Naomi sat by the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Mr. Langston dried dishes beside her. "You don't trust him," the butler said. "No," Naomi replied. "But Caleb deserves truth, even if it's complicated." Mr. Langston nodded. "Truth has a way of surfacing whether we like it or not." Naomi looked out the window. Rain had started to fall, thin lines like the past trying to wash itself clean. "Do you think Rachel would want him here?" she asked. "I think Rachel would have forgiven him," Mr. Langston said. "But she would have watched him like a hawk." Naomi smiled. "Then I'll do both." The next morning, Caleb woke early and happy. Naomi dressed him in a soft blue onesie and brought him downstairs. Julian was already waiting in the sunroom. Isaiah sat across from him, wearing the same coat, but he'd shaved and looked more presentable. When Naomi walked in with the baby, Isaiah stood, emotion breaking across his face like a cracked mirror. "He looks like her," Isaiah whispered. Naomi sat beside Julian, holding Caleb securely. The baby stared at Isaiah, curious but calm. "Hi there," Isaiah said, his voice rough. "I'm your uncle." "That's a funny word, huh? Uncle." Caleb blinked, then grinned. Isaiah chuckled softly, tears catching in his eyes. "May I hold him?" Naomi looked at Julian, then back at Isaiah. She stood slowly and placed Caleb in his arms. Isaiah held the child like he was made of light. Naomi didn't take her eyes off him. After the visit, Julian followed Naomi into the hallway. "Thoughts?" "He didn't flinch," she said. "Didn't try to charm. Didn't lie. That's more than most." Julian nodded. "He asked to stay in town for a few days." "I think that's fair," Naomi said. "But we keep control." Julian looked at her. "You don't have to carry all the weight anymore, Naomi." She met his eyes. "I'm not. I'm sharing it. With the one person who finally showed up." He nodded. "I'll talk to legal. Make sure we have safeguards." She smiled. "Thank you." Then Julian said something he hadn't before. "You're not just here for Caleb anymore, Naomi. You're here for me too." She paused, but didn't deny it. Julian Whitmore wasn't a man who often reread legal documents. He had lawyers for that, well-paid ones. But ever since Isaiah showed up, something gnawed at him. A restlessness. Like a loose thread in a tailored suit. Something about Rachel's last days, her planning, her intentions, didn't quite line up. That morning he asked Mr. Langston for the storage key. And by mid-afternoon, Julian found himself in the estate's document room. The place smelled of dust and polished wood, shelves filled with everything from foundation grants to guest lists for parties long forgotten. Julian bypassed the usual folders and headed for the steel box marked Vaughn Estate, Originals, Private. He pulled it down, wiped the lid with his sleeve, and opened it. Inside was Rachel's original will, the one filed with the court. But tucked beneath it, folded between pages of estate planning drafts, was something he hadn't seen before. A letter. Handwritten. Undated. Sealed with wax bearing Rachel's initials. He opened it carefully. "Julian, if you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say goodbye properly. You were never the easiest man to love, but you were the only one who ever made me feel safe enough to try. Naomi Reed is not a nanny. She's not staff. She is the only person I trust with our son if I'm gone. Not because she's perfect, but because she understands grief. She doesn't flinch when life gets ugly. There is a clause in the private trust, not the filed one, granting her co-guardianship of Caleb. It is not a courtesy. It is my final instruction. Please, don't fight her. Let her help you become the father I always knew you could be." Rachel. Julian sat down, heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't known. Not the depth. Not the clarity. This wasn't a last-minute sentiment scribbled on a hospital napkin. This was deliberate, legal, binding, and it changed everything. Meanwhile, in the sunroom, Naomi sat with Caleb curled on her lap. The storm outside had passed, leaving streaks of sunlight across the floor. Isaiah Vaughn entered quietly. "You're good with him," he said. Naomi looked up, cautious but polite. "He makes it easy." Isaiah smiled, then grew serious. "I meant to say something earlier. Rachel, she wrote me once. Years ago. When she first got pregnant. Naomi stilled. What did she say? She told me she was scared. That Julian was distant. Cold. But she also said she met someone at the hospital who made her believe in mothers again. A nurse who held her hand during a panic attack and stayed past her shift to help her breathe. Naomi blinked. I didn't know she remembered that. She never forgot, Isaiah said. That nurse changed everything for her. Naomi said nothing for a long moment. Then, that was before Elijah died. Isaiah nodded. I figured. But you still stayed in the field. That matters. Naomi gave a soft laugh. I didn't stay. I ran. Took jobs below my training. Cleaned floors. Folded laundry. Sometimes running brings us exactly where we're supposed to be, Isaiah said. Naomi gave him a long, unreadable look. Sometimes. Julian returned from the archive with the letter in hand. He walked into the sunroom and paused at the sight of Naomi and Isaiah, two pieces of Rachel's life that had never been meant to overlap. And yet, here they were. Naomi stood, sensing his presence. I found something, he said quietly. Rachel's handwritten clause. It confirms what she told Malcolm and what's in the recorder. He extended the letter to Naomi. She hesitated before taking it. Why show me this now? She asked. Because I need you to know that you're not here on borrowed time, Julian said. You're here because Rachel chose you. And now, so do I. Naomi read the letter once. Then again. The third time, she folded it gently and held it close. I don't want your pity, she said softly. You don't have it, Julian replied. You have my partnership. Isaiah watched the exchange silently, then stood. I'll give you both a moment. As he stepped out, Naomi looked back at Julian. You're really ready to let someone else lead in your own house? He smiled faintly. It's not about who leads. It's about who protects. And you've done that since the day I walked in on you holding my son. Naomi's eyes softened, but she didn't cry. She didn't need to. For once, someone else had spoken the truth before she had to. Later that evening, as the estate quieted and Caleb slept between them on a blanket in the study, Julian poured 2 glasses of wine. He handed one to Naomi. Is this a thank you? She asked. It's a truce, he said. And a promise. She tapped her glass gently against his. To Caleb. To Caleb, he echoed. And for the first time, it wasn't awkward. It was right. Sunlight spilled across the marble floors of the Whitmore estate, warmer than it had felt in months. Naomi stood in the center of the once sterile kitchen, apron dusted with flour, humming quietly as she mixed a batch of cornbread, Elijah's favorite. She hadn't cooked in this kitchen before. Monica had made sure of that. But now, things were changing. Caleb sat nearby in a high chair, gurgling at the wooden spoon Naomi had given him to hold. He smacked it against the tray like it was an instrument, laughing at the noise it made. In the hallway, Julian paused, watching the scene. No tension. No cold formality. Just life. Smells good, he said, stepping inside. Naomi looked over her shoulder. You cook? Only when I want the fire department to visit. She chuckled and passed him a dish towel. Then make yourself useful. Julian took it, surprised at how natural it felt. For years, this kitchen had been silent except for the clatter of staff. But now it sounded like home. Isaiah left early this morning, he said, drying a bowl. He said he's headed to New York. Wants to figure some things out. Naomi nodded. I hope he does. He asked if he could write to Caleb. What did you say? I said yes. But only if the letters go through you first. Naomi arched a brow. You trust me with that? Julian looked at her. I trust you with my son. Everything else is easy. That afternoon, Naomi stood in the west garden, trimming the hydrangeas. Caleb napped upstairs, and the house was quieter than usual. Vivien Whitmore's voice came from behind. You've changed the house. Naomi turned. Julian's mother stood by the stone path, hands clasped, her gray eyes as sharp as ever. Naomi wiped her hands on her apron. For better or worse? Vivien stepped closer. For the better, though I didn't think so at first. Naomi waited. Vivien's voice softened. When Rachel passed, I thought no one could fill her shoes. I didn't want anyone to try. But grief makes us possessive. It turns love into territory. Naomi nodded slowly. I never wanted to replace her. Vivien's eyes glistened. But you did something she couldn't. You healed what she left behind. A long silence stretched between them. Then Vivien did something she hadn't done since the day they met. She reached forward and touched Naomi's hand. Thank you, she whispered. Julian found Naomi in the library later that evening, sitting by the fireplace with a book in her lap and Caleb asleep on her shoulder. Another literary classic? He teased. She held up the cover. Brown bear, what do you see? He laughed. A favorite of mine. Naomi smiled. He likes the rhythm. Julian sat beside her, careful not to wake Caleb. The fire crackled softly between them. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous, she replied. He smirked. I want to convert the East Wing into something new. Naomi looked over. Like what? A learning space. For Caleb. Maybe other kids later. Rachel always dreamed of turning this house into something open, more than just a fortress for the rich. Naomi tilted her head. And you want my input? I want you to lead it. She blinked. Julian, I'm a caregiver. Not a director. You're both, he said. And Rachel saw it before I did. Naomi looked at the fire. You're rewriting everything, aren't you? Julian nodded. The house. The rules. My own heart. She looked at him then. Really looked. And for the first time, she saw not just a grieving husband or a distant billionaire, but a man trying to become more. You don't have to do it alone, she said. Julian smiled. I know. That night, Naomi stood at the window in her quarters, holding the letter Rachel had written. The ink was fading, but the intent remained. A co-guardian. A friend. A bridge between what was broken and what could still be whole. She folded the letter, placed it gently in her drawer, and looked out into the dark. The house no longer felt cold. It felt rewritten. By hands that had once only cleaned. By love that had once only been borrowed. Now, it was something more. Something permanent. The email came just after dawn. Subject, urgent inquiry regarding Whitmore estate nanny scandal. From Talia Mendez, senior reporter, The Daily Beacon. Naomi's eyes froze on the screen. Her stomach dropped. Sources claim the Whitmore family employed a maid who breastfed the billionaire's infant son without consent. Please respond before publication. Deadline, 4 p.m. today. She reread the message twice, hands trembling. The storm she thought had passed was gathering again, louder, meaner, more public. Julian was already in the kitchen when she walked in, phone in hand. You saw it? She asked. He looked up, his face unreadable. She sent the same message to my office. To the board. Even my foundation director. Naomi swallowed. Monica. He nodded. She's talking. Naomi set her hands on the counter to steady herself. This could ruin everything. Julian stepped closer. Only if we let them control the narrative. She blinked. What are you saying? I'm saying we go public first. On our terms. Naomi stared at him. You want to tell the world I nursed your son? Julian nodded. Because the truth is, you saved him. And me. By noon, Dana Liu arrived. She was a respected journalist. Not a gossip reporter. She'd broken corporate scandals, exposed political corruption, but she was also known for listening. For reporting stories with dignity. Julian trusted her. So did Naomi. They met in the conservatory. Sunlight streamed through the high glass walls. Caleb sat on Naomi's lap, chewing on a plush giraffe, blissfully unaware of the storm below the surface. Dana set down her recorder. I appreciate you reaching out. This isn't the kind of thing most billionaires rush to talk about. Julian folded his hands. That's because most billionaires don't want to admit they were wrong. Dana's brows lifted slightly. Naomi leaned in. This isn't a scandal. It's a story about grief. About survival. About what a baby needs when everything else has been stripped away. Dana hit record. And Naomi told the truth. She told the story of a screaming, motherless child who wouldn't eat. She told of being alone in that nursery, heartbreaking, instincts flaring, and making the impossible choice. She told of the fear, the accusation, the betrayal, and the healing that came after. Julian told his part too. The arrogance, the misjudgment, the slow realization that Rachel had left behind not just a child, but a plan, and a woman strong enough to carry it. Dana listened. She didn't interrupt. And when they finished, she turned off the recorder and said simply, "The world needs to hear this." The article went live that evening. Headline: She nursed the billionaire's son and saved a family from breaking. Subhead: Inside the extraordinary story of Naomi Reed and Julian Whitmore, grief, trust, and the unexpected bond that changed everything. It spread like wildfire. Some were outraged. Some were inspired. But most were silent. Reading. Processing. Within an hour, #Naomi Reed trended on social media. By midnight, Naomi's inbox was filled with messages from mothers. From widowers. From strangers saying, "Thank you for telling this. I thought I was alone." The next morning, the estate was flooded with press vans. But none got past the gate. Mr. Langston stood guard like a lion, arms folded, eyes fierce. No appointment. No entry. Inside, Julian paced as his phone buzzed non-stop. Board members, investors, even Senator Dean Carver, who'd once supported Julian's projects but now wanted clarification. "He's calling again," Julian muttered, tossing the phone on the couch. Naomi looked up from her tea. "Let it ring." He turned to her. "We may lose everything." Naomi took a breath. "Then let it be lost for the right reasons." Julian sat down beside her. "Do you regret it? Going public?" She shook her head. "I only regret not being strong enough to tell the truth sooner." Julian reached for her hand. "You were stronger than all of us." That afternoon, Carmen Hill, the night nurse who'd once been fired under Monica's influence, showed up at the gate. Julian welcomed her inside. "I read the article," she said, "and I just wanted to say, thank you. For standing up. I thought no one would ever believe me." Naomi hugged her. "They do now." Carmen smiled. "Maybe now more women will be believed the first time." That evening, as twilight settled over the estate, Naomi stood outside with Caleb nestled in her arms. She looked up at the sprawling house. Not a mansion anymore. A battleground. A sanctuary. A home. Julian joined her, slipping an arm gently around her shoulders. "They're calling us brave," he said. "We're not brave," Naomi replied. "We're just honest." He looked down at her. "That's braver than most." She didn't respond. Just leaned into him, Caleb between them, breathing evenly. Spring came early that year. The cherry trees lining the Whitmore estate were already in bloom, petals falling like confetti across the gravel walkways. The air smelled of fresh grass and quiet beginnings. Naomi stood near the garden swing, watching Caleb take his first unsteady steps toward the fountain. Julian walked beside him, not leading, not holding, just there, ready to catch him if he fell. He didn't. Naomi smiled, heart full in a way she never imagined possible again. Just 1 year ago, she had been nothing more than a name on a folded application. Just a maid. Just someone passing through. But she belonged. Inside, the East Wing had been transformed. No longer the cold, empty gallery it once was. Now it echoed with children's voices. Art supplies. Learning corners. Tactile toys and bookshelves filled with stories about love, loss, and healing. Above the door hung a simple wooden sign. The Rachel Vaughn Learning Room. Naomi had chosen the name. Julian hadn't argued. "She should be part of what we're building," she had said. And now she was. That afternoon, they held a small dedication ceremony. Not for press. Not for donors. Just family. Vivien Whitmore sat in the front row, eyes misty behind her silver frames. Mr. Langston stood at the back, arms crossed proudly. Isaiah returned, dressed in a tailored navy suit, holding a sealed envelope he would later place into the memory box. A letter for Caleb when he turned 18. Naomi stood before them, dressed in a simple blue dress. Not as staff, not as help, but as something more. She cleared her throat. Rachel once wrote that I understood grief better than anyone she knew. I think what she really meant is that I didn't run from it. She looked over at Julian, who stood beside Caleb's stroller. I stayed. And staying, I learned that grief and love are never far apart. They live in the same house. They sit at the same table. The room was still. She smiled. This space is for children who have lost something. A parent. A home. A sense of safety. It's a place to remember, and to begin again. Applause came gently, respectfully. Naomi stepped back as Julian came forward. He didn't speak from a podium. Just looked around the room. 1 year ago, he began, I thought I had lost everything. My wife. My peace. My ability to be a father. He paused, his gaze settling on Naomi. I didn't know that grief could open doors. That it could bring people into your life who were meant to be there all along. He looked down at Caleb. This house was once built on walls and silence. Now, it's built on trust. On honesty. On second chances. He smiled. Thank you all for being part of that. No grand speeches. Just truth. Later that night, the house was quiet again. Caleb slept peacefully in his crib. Naomi stood at the window of the nursery, arms crossed, watching the moonlight drift across the lawn. Julian entered quietly, stopping beside her. You were incredible today, he said. She shrugged. I just told the truth. That's rare, he said. And brave. She turned to face him. What now? He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, flat box. Inside was a key. What's this? It's to the cottage behind the orchard, he said. I had it renovated. For Caleb. For whenever you want space that's yours but still close. Naomi stared at it, unsure what to say. I know this house is big, he continued, but it was never mine to give. That cottage, that's for your name. Not mine. She held the key, fingers trembling. Julian. He stepped forward. You gave me back my son. My life. This is the smallest thing I can do. She looked up at him. You gave me something too. What's that? Room to breathe, she whispered. He smiled. And this time, there was no tension. No fear of lines being crossed. No secrets left unspoken. He leaned in and kissed her forehead, gentle, certain, not as a goodbye, but as a beginning. Weeks passed. Seasons shifted. Naomi moved into the cottage. Caleb spent mornings in the learning room and afternoons chasing butterflies under Julian's watchful eye. The press stopped calling. The board calmed. The estate settled. And still, the house hummed with life. Sometimes, Naomi would find Julian asleep on the garden bench, Caleb snuggled against his chest, sunlight dancing across their matching curls. Sometimes, Julian would come by the cottage in the evening, bringing dinner he didn't know how to cook, but tried anyway. And sometimes they said nothing at all, just sat together in the quiet, where everything had once fallen apart, and now had come full circle. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from. Naomi wasn't just a maid. She was a mother when the world looked away. And Julian wasn't just a billionaire. He became the man his son needed, because someone believed he could. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tag someone who believes in second chances. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional stories that remind us. Love isn't always loud, but it's always enough.